All right, hello everybody. So today is going to be the final day that we actually have a video posted for our video lecture series. What we are going to be doing is creating an application that is based off of taking a Google file, like a Google Sheet, for example. It could also be Microsoft Excel, doesn't matter. And we're actually going to read information into a program. This can then be further formatted, your program, into not only just reading information from a file, but also writing information to a file as well. We're not going to get into the writing part. Normally, I would probably leave that as an enhancement that you would then need to make, but we are close to the final, actually the week before the final. If we got to this a week earlier, I would have had you done this last week, but there will not be an assignment based off this. So anyway, so let's get into it, and let's see what we need to do for this. So the interface is actually really simplistic. There's only 3 components, as you can see on the right-hand side, that I am going to need to add into this. There's also other ways that we can go about doing this as well, but we're just going to cover this way. It is very straightforward. The first thing that I want to do is on your user interface, I want to grab a label and drag the label so that it's at the very top of the screen here. So what I did from there, when I took that label, I went over into the Properties tab, and I adjusted the height to be 30 pixels, set size, but then I made the width a fill parent. I then, in the text area, put projectile motion, and then for the text alignment, I put center. And then also, as you can see with the font size here, I increased the font size from the default 14 up to 28. All right, so I left that as is, so it's nice, larger, kind of right in the center. And then what I want to have below in my list here is the information that I have from my Google Sheets document. So let me shift over there and kind of show you what I got here. So I have a projectile motion sheet, all right, and so I've got all the needed components in here. I've got the header up top here, so the velocity, the overall velocity of the projectile, the X and Y components of the velocity, the X and Y components of the acceleration, the range, the displacement traveling in the horizontal, and the displacement traveling in the vertical, as well as the launch angle of the projectile. All right, so this would be some information that I could normally have my students in my classroom perform a lab, collecting this data and then calculating at least the velocity components or the range components. But aside from that, I want to show you how we can actually take data that I know some of you are science majors, how you can actually take data from a lab experiment and you can actually create an application so you can import data into your program. First very important thing that we need to do with the sheet before we actually get into the code is we got to make some minor adjustments to our projectile motion sheet. So the first thing I want you to do, and I've already done this, but I'll show you what you need, is to click on, it might look a little different from your browser because I'm using a mobile browser. But as you can see, we click on the tab here, get to the area where we have the share and export. So once we create share and export, there should be something there called link sharing. So you're going to want to make sure that you turn that on. Sometimes you might have to click on the share option here. And by default, the share setting should be set for just you. You want to make sure that you open it up for anybody who has the link to this document. And then once you're done with that, what you can do is you can just click on the copy link. So we copy the link to the clipboard. So that's all that you need to do for setting up your document. Once you input the data, you got to make sure you turn the sharing on and you open up the sharing ability so that it's pretty much set to a public setting, not a private setting. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is you're going to open up any browser. It doesn't matter, just because I can see, so I can show you. We're going to paste that link into the document here, but as you can see right now, the end of the URL here, you've got the google.com spreadsheet / and then the unique ID of the document /edit. And that basically gives the person the editing rights to open up that document and then edit the document as well. But we don't want this URL exactly. We need to change this, all right? So what I'm going to do at the end here, I'm going to delete out where it says edit, and I'm going to type in export, format, equals CSV. All right, and so first thing before I do anything, I'm going to highlight the whole thing and I'm going to copy it. But as you can see, when I click on enter with this document, all right, we don't go to a web page. All right, it prompts us to, do you want to download this projectile motion sheet 1.csv? All right, so I can hit download if I want. You don't have to if you don't want to, but once it's downloaded, we can actually click and open it. And as you can see here, what it does, it opens up a form, a CSV form with all the needed data in there, which is just like the spreadsheet. The importance is that a CSV file stands for, the CSV stands for comma separated value. And so what that means is that when we import this data, it's going to show the data as v comma vx comma vy comma ax comma ay comma x, etc., etc. All right, so that is basically important because that is how we can take specific data from a Google spreadsheet or an Excel spreadsheet or whatever, and we can actually convert it into this sort of general file, a CSV file, and then we can import and or export data to the CSV file. Once you have that CSV file, what we can do is we can then open it up within Google or within Microsoft Excel or whatever, and then you can have the data within that program as well. All right, so once you have the file all set, all right, let's get back to the program. So now that the file is adjusted to how we need it to be, again, remember, you should have a copy of that link. All right, so the next thing, and we're going to use it in a second. So the next thing, what we're going to want to do on the side here is we're going to grab list view, and we're just going to drag and drop a list view right underneath that label. All right, and as you can see on my settings, I just have the settings set to automatic. Height and width, I have the text size is 12, default colors for everything. So, right, so there's nothing that I'm going to do. I'm also not changing the names of this because I'm not too worried since these are the only 3 components I have. Otherwise, if it was like a normal thing or an assignment or whatever, I definitely would change it to make it more meaningful. The last thing we need to do, all right, as you can see this web 1 here, we need to go down here to where it says connectivity. And there's a couple, starter libraries here. So what we're going to have is we're going to grab this web connectivity, this library here, and we're going to drag and we're going to drop it on the screen because it's a non-visible component. So as you can see with the web one, the only important thing here that we need to do now is under the URL, I need to paste that URL that I changed from that Google Sheet. And as you can see, most importantly at the end here, it no longer says edit, it gives me that export format equals CSV. So you need to make sure that your ending, regardless of if you're using a Microsoft file or a Google file, all right, you need to change this ending so that it says export format equals CSV, because that then it's specifically grabbing information from a CSV format. And also if you choose to write, it's going to write it to a CSV format. And then the programs like Microsoft or Google can interpret it just as easy. But the web capabilities, the web viewer, the program itself cannot delineate information if it is not in a CSV file. You can create scripting files too, and that will, you can get around it, but still, you need to do additional coding. So, but if you want to use just standard files, all right, convert it into a CSV file. Easiest way to go. All right, so that is all we need for the front page. All right, so now what I'm going to do, all right, I'm going to go into my blocks and we're going to finish putting the program together. All right, so just like anything, the first thing I need to do is I need to create some, initialize some variables because, again, a program like this, I'm going to definitely be needing variables to hold information. All right, and so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable, initialize it. All right, and so the name of the variable I'm going to call table. And as you can imagine, it's going to be a table of the information. That is going to be the main variable that we're going to house all the information, that we're going to store all the information from that CSV file. And what I'm going to do is I want to create an empty list, because right now I don't want to hard code this table with anything. I want to basically, creating an empty list is sort of like putting a bucket next to that, and that bucket is empty and it's ready to be filled. So it's like a placeholder container that information can be dumped into and stored into. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to create another variable, initialize. And this one I am going to call just velocity for short. And the same thing, what I want to do is I want to create a list and go to create empty list, plug that in. And again, the whole purpose behind this is that this is going to be my list within my list. The main list is going to be the table itself, all right, which is going to house just generically all the information. But I now create a list within a list, and then this is going to then house the individual pieces that I'm going to basically pull out and separate. and you'll see what that'll look like eventually. So when I start the program, I'm not going to click any buttons. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to call a screen initialize. So once the program runs, the screen will initialize and will load all the data that I need to load. All right, and so what I need to do now is I need to go under Web 1, and I want to grab this web1.get. And also, what I need to do is I need to go under Web 1, and I'll explain these in a second, and click on the this one here, web1.getText. So again, we go back to the designer here. My Web 1 directly points to a URL, my Google Doc. All right, and so now what happens is when I call web1.get, what it's doing, it's basically directing to this URL, and it's getting the information from that URL. And because it is a CSV file, it's automatically pulling all that content from that CSV file. So that's the purpose of this get procedure right over here. The next thing we have is this web1.getText. So this is now going to be, we need to get the individual components within the CSV file. All right, so what I'm going to do, though, is I'm also going to build a procedure in a minute. So I'm going to grab this top procedure here. Let me pull it out, and then we're going to fill that up in just a second, rather than having to put everything in here in this web1.getText. So what I need to do is I need to now grab all this needed information, and this is where this table initialize global variable comes from. Because what I want to do is I want to take all that information from the CSV file and dump it into this variable, so then I can kind of access the information by referencing the variable table. So to do that, I'm going to go into variables and I'm going to grab my set feature. I want to make sure that this is set to global table. And then there's some built-in functions here. Okay, we're not doing anything with URL. We're not doing anything with response code or response type. Okay, response content, though, we are, because, I mean, that is basically the content, the information that we're going to need to access coming from the CSV file. The problem, though, is that I can't just plug in get response content, because App Inventor doesn't understand the information coming from the CSV file. So what we need to do is we need to go under my lists here, and there should be an item that's down below here, list from CSV table.text. So what this function right here does, or what this list feature does, is that it's going to take all that information from the CSV file that's being stored under this content variable. It's going to feed it into this block here, list from CSV table, and it's going to now convert it and format it into something that's readable by App Inventor. All right, and then we're going to take that readable information by App Inventor and we're going to store it within global table. All right, so that's the whole purpose behind that. Otherwise, if we plugged in this response content into global table, App Inventor wouldn't be able to display or wouldn't be able to understand the information that is coming through. So this piece in the middle here is very important, because this allows us to do that formatting or that conversion. So now what I'm going to do is, and I'm going to build it after. Normally I would build it first, but the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call the procedure down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just call this data, but this is the procedure block that I'm going to create that's going to format my data so that I can display it on the screen. All right, and then after I call the data here, what I'm going to do is I need to then populate this data within my list view on the screen. So again, remember, whenever we need to populate information on the screen, all right, every item within a list is called an element. So we want to use this set list one view.elements feature, and we're going to plug that in right below that procedure. And then for this one, well, what elements do I want to populate? Well, I want to populate that list of list, all right, which is going to be this global velocity piece here. Now, this might not make sense right now, but it will when we build that list of list within this data component here. All right, so with that being said, let me kind of slide some of this out of the way. And let's go into this procedure, and let's build this guy over here. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do, so you can do one of two things. If you want So here's our list here. We have a header here of obviously the the velocity, x component velocity, y component velocity, whatever. You might want to maybe just populate your data and not have the header information here. And if that's the case, then what you would do is you would go under your list, and then you would select this block right here. Remove. Whoops. You would use the remove item from list, and then you would the list would obviously be your table, and then your index would be 1. All right, but I don't want to remove anything from my list. I want to have the headers there. I also want to have the data as well. All right, so it's kind of your call of how you want to tailor your program. So I'm just going to get rid of this for right now. So what I'm going to do is first thing I want to do is, as you can see with my list, I have a bunch of data here. All right, so what I need to do, every index is going to count for, the row. All right, so we're going to go across index 1, index 2, index 3. I'm sorry, I meant column. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so we're going to start off by grabbing the V, and then we'll start. And then that gets paired with the proper numbers and so on and so forth. And each column will be paired up, and then again the rows themselves will pair naturally from going from left to right as well. So as long as we code it how we need to. All right, so what I'm going to do, we're going to go to the for each item in list. All right, so we're going to use the for loop. That for loop we're going to plug into here, because again, with the purpose of the for loop, however many items I have in my list, I'm going to iterate, or I'm going to loop through until I reach the end of the list, and then we'll exit out. But as long as there's data, as long as there's rows in the list that we have to go through and populate, well then, I need to go through everything. All right, so what are we going to do? Well, we need, for each item in the list, and which list are we referring to? Well, we're referring to our list that is stored in table. That, again, is our overall, as we can see down here, the response content that we dumped into the CSV table list, all right, was stored into global table. So that's the variable that has all the needed information. So now what I want to do is I want to now create the list of lists. All right, I want to kind of parse everything out or separate everything out and populate what I need to. And in order to do that, I'm going to go back into my list here, and I'm going to select add items to list, which is right up here toward the top. All right, and we're going to plug that one inside here. All right, so what items do I want into the list? Well, what list am I referring to? Well, now this is going to be my list within the list. That's right, and that's what we have this velocity variable and the secondary create empty list for. So I'm going to grab this global velocity, and that's going to plug into my list here. All right, now what do I want to do? Well, now I want to call and I want to index every single thing individually. Okay, so the item piece now, we're going to do this. Because we have 8 separate columns to do, this is going to get kind of long and lengthy over here, but I'm going to select the join item, and I now need to add all the inputs that are going to account for every single column item that we have. So let me count. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we should have a total of 15 inputs when all is said and done. And the reason why we need 15 is because what I'm going to also do is I'm going to have commas separating each input item. Because if you don't put anything there, it's just going to be a list of just like letters and numbers, and I don't want that. I want to separate things out so that it looks at least somewhat neat and clean. 6. All right, so we said we need 15, so that's 7. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And if I thought about this ahead of time, I wouldn't have had a chart with so many data entry points, but oh well. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're first going to start off by selecting the first item. So the global table is going to store the items needed into the local variable here as well, as in it's going to break it down per item. So what I want to do is I want to select now the specific items. I don't want to have the whole table. I want to have only select items. So I'm going to go into my list here and grab the select list item, and I'm going to plug it into this first input here. All right. And so what am I going to have? Well, I'm going to have the item that is stored within this local variable here. And then the specific index that I want, all right, I want it to be referencing index number 1, because again, I want it to be that first spot. There we go. All right. Then what I want to do is I want to have some sort of separation between that information and the next bit of information. So I'm going to just add an empty string in the middle here, and then I'm going to add 2 spaces, a comma, and then 2 spaces. All right, and so that will give me the needed space in between each number set, or the headers up top. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to control copy, duplicate. All right, again, it's the same thing. The only difference now is we're now going to look at index 2 instead of index 1. And then the same thing, I'm going to control copy and duplicate the comma as well. So every other one is going to be a select item from list, and then the corresponding every other one is going to now be the comma with the space separation. So I'm just going to kind of do these out really quick, and then I'll copy and paste all of the select list items. And the select list items should go all the way up to the number 8. All right, so unfortunately it's going to take me a minute, but we'll be done soon. All right. All right, so that takes care of that list of lists there. And normally what I would have done, and I kind of did it ahead of time, but let me zoom this out a little bit. The last step would have been now to then add the list element view here so that we would see it populate within that list, but I did that ahead of time. So anyway, I mean, that's just basically, so this function here, this data procedure, all right, is basically creating this list of lists here that we are basically going to be taking all the information that's being called and stored from that CSV table, that CSV file, stored in table, and then we're calling that procedure here and then populating it within this list of elements view here. So let's do a quick check to see how this works, and then we can kind of wrap it up. Let's go to Create AI Companion, scan my code. And let me switch over to my camera view. Okay, and as you can see, we have the first row being populated. All right, with all the V, the VX, VY, we have the next, all the data being populated. Unfortunately, there's extra formatting that would need to be done so that you can kind of get everything set in the rows. There's other ways too that you can populate them even better, in my opinion, into proper columns than this. But at least it's fairly good enough where you can kind of match everything up and you can kind of see, what matches with what. But again, so what we did here was we've read a spreadsheet file, and we were able to pull that into a App Inventor program. Like I said, an enhancement for this, or the next part of this, would be to then create text fields to then input information and have a submit button. And then upon hitting submit, you would then take that input and then you would then upload it, or you would transfer it from the program into the spreadsheet itself, which is definitely doable. All right, so with that being said, I think that pretty much wraps everything up. So that was the last bit that I needed to show you about how you can actually use other applications, and tie them directly into App Inventor. So hopefully this was helpful, and again, you can kind of play with it some more, and have a better understanding of how you can talk with different files, uploading and reading information from there. So that'll do it. So I hope everybody has a great day. Pay attention to emails that I'm sending out. We will have an MS Teams meet on Thursday night, which you can, if you don't want to show up, you don't have to. That's fine. But you'll be able to ask any questions that you may need to for the final, which is set for next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. All right, folks. Have a great day. Take care.